Cal adjusted his fedora, a sly grin spreading across his weathered face. The night was thick with anticipation, the kind that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. He had been planning this heist for months, every detail meticulously mapped out in his mind. The stakes were high, but so were the rewards. His crew, four shadows against the flickering gaslight, awaited his signal. Each one of them was a master in their own right, hand-picked for their unique skills. There was Jack, the lockpicker with fingers so nimble they seemed to dance over any lock. Sarah, the tech genius who could hack into any system. Mike, the muscle whose strength was only matched by his loyalty. And finally Lisa, the con artist, whose charm could disarm even the most suspicious of guards. They were the best, each a master of their craft, drawn together by whispers of forgotten riches. Tonight's prize, Blackwood Manor. The manor was more than just a house, it was a legend. Stories of its hidden treasures had circulated for decades, each tale more tantalizing than the last. But it wasn't just the promise of wealth that drew them. It was the challenge, the thrill of outsmarting the unknown. Blackwood Manor, a name uttered with reverence and fear. The mansion loomed in the distance, its silhouette dark against the night sky. It was said to be cursed, a place where the line between the living and the dead blurred. But Cal and his crew were not easily spooked. They had faced danger before, and they were ready to face it again. Locals whispered of a cursed family, their fortune hidden within the decaying walls. The Blackwood family had been wealthy beyond measure, but their fortune had come at a price. Tragedy had struck them down one by one, leaving the mansion to rot and their riches to be forgotten, or so the stories went. Cal didn't believe in curses, but he did believe in the power of a good story to keep people away. Tales spoke of sudden disappearances, of blood staining the once pristine marble. The stories were enough to keep most people away, but not Cal. He saw the mansion as a challenge, a puzzle to be solved. The bloodstains, the disappearances, they were just part of the legend, part of what made the prize so alluring. Superstitious nonsense, Cal thought. Just another obstacle on the path to riches. He had faced worse in his time, and he wasn't about to let a few ghost stories stand in his way. He had a plan, and he was going to see it through. The crew trusted him, and he trusted them. Together they were unstoppable. Cal rasped, his voice barely a murmur. "Remember, we get in, we get the goods, we get out!" His voice was steady, confident. He had gone over the plan 100 times in his head, and he knew it inside and out. The crew listened intently, their faces serious. They knew what was at stake, and they were ready to do whatever it took to succeed. No unnecessary risks. Got it? Cal's eyes scanned the faces of his crew, looking for any sign of doubt. But there was none. They were all in, committed to the plan. They nodded in unison, their expressions determined. They had come too far to back out now. Nods met his words. They were professionals. Fear a luxury they couldn't afford. Each one of them had their own reasons for being there, their own motivations. But tonight, they were united by a common goal. The promise of unimaginable wealth was enough to push any fear to the back of their minds. Tonight they danced with the devil, lured by the promise of unimaginable wealth. The air was thick with tension as they approached the mansion. The old, creaking gates seemed to groan in protest as they pushed them open. The path to the front door was overgrown with weeds, a testament to the years of neglect. But none of that mattered now. They were here, and there was no turning back. The whispers of fortune had led them to this moment, and they were ready to seize it. The wrought iron gates, rusted and groaning, yielded reluctantly to their efforts. Each creak and groan seemed to echo through the night, a mournful cry from the past. The gates had stood for centuries, weathering countless storms and witnessing the rise and fall of the Blackwood family. Now they opened once more, as if reluctantly allowing the living to trespass into the realm of the dead. Blackwood Manor loomed before them, a gothic monstrosity against the storm-laden sky. The mansion's silhouette was jagged and imposing, its spires reaching out like skeletal fingers clawing at the heavens. Lightning flashed, illuminating the darkened windows that seemed to stare back at them with a malevolent gaze. The air was thick with the scent of rain and decay, a fitting prelude to the horrors that lay within. Gargoyles perched on the eaves, their expressions twisted into silent screams. These stone sentinels had watched over the manor for generations, their grotesque forms a testament to the dark artistry of a bygone era. Each gargoyle seemed to tell a story of suffering and torment, their eyes following the intruders with an almost lifelike intensity. It was as if they were warning them to turn back, to leave this cursed place before it was too late. A chill wind whistled through the skeletal trees, their branches clawing at the night sky. The trees, long dead and devoid of leaves, stood like silent sentinels guarding the path to the manor. Their gnarled branches twisted and turned, casting eerie shadows that danced in the moonlight. The wind carried with it the whispers of the past, tales of tragedy and despair that had long been forgotten by the living. Legends whispered of the Blackwood curse, of a family consumed by their own greed, their souls trapped within the mansion's walls. The curse was said to have begun with the patriarch, a man whose insatiable hunger for power and wealth led him to make a pact with dark forces. His descendants, each more corrupt than the last, had all met untimely and gruesome ends. Their spirits, unable to find peace, were said to haunt the manor, seeking vengeance on any who dared to disturb their eternal rest. Cal scoffed. Ghosts and curses were for fools. He had always been a man of reason, dismissing the supernatural as mere superstition. Yet, as he stood before the manor, a sense of unease began to creep into his mind. He shook it off, attributing it to the eerie atmosphere and the tales he had heard. After all, he was here for a purpose, and he wouldn't let ghost stories deter him. Tonight, fear was their ally, keeping the superstitious locals at bay. The villagers had long avoided the manor, their fear of the curse keeping them away. This worked to Cal's advantage, as he and his companions could explore the manor without interference. The streets were deserted, the only sounds being the distant rumble of thunder and the occasional howl of the wind. It was as if the entire world had been abandoned, leaving them alone to face whatever horrors awaited within the manor. They approached cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the overgrown weeds. The garden, once a place of beauty and tranquility, had long since fallen into disrepair. Weeds and thorny bushes had taken over, creating a tangled mess that was difficult to navigate. Each step was taken with care, as if the very ground beneath them could give way at any moment. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying vegetation, adding to the sense of foreboding that hung over them. The mansion seemed to watch them, its windows like vacant eyes. Each window was dark and empty, yet they seemed to follow their every move. It was as if the manor itself was alive, a malevolent entity that had been waiting for their arrival. The sense of being watched was almost palpable, sending shivers down their spines. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone, that unseen eyes were observing their every step. A shiver ran down Cal's spine, a prickling sensation he quickly dismissed. He told himself it was just the cold, the wind, the eerie atmosphere. But deep down, a part of him couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. He had always prided himself on his rationality, yet here, in the shadow of Blackwood Manor, he found himself questioning everything he thought he knew. The line between reality and the supernatural seemed to blur, leaving him with an unsettling feeling that he couldn't quite shake. It was just the wind, he told himself, just the wind. But as the wind howled through the desolate landscape, carrying with it the faintest of whispers, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the legends than he had ever believed. The night was far from over, and the true horrors of Blackwood Manor had yet to reveal themselves. The air grew heavy as they crossed the threshold, a palpable sense of dread settling upon them. Dust motes danced in the faint moonlight that filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating the decaying grandeur of the mansion's interior. Cobwebs draped the once ornate furniture like shrouds, and the scent of decay hung heavy in the air. A sudden gust of wind slammed a door shut, the sound echoing through the silent house like a gunshot. Cal's hand instinctively went to the revolver tucked into his waistband. He scanned the shadows, his senses on high alert. Cal muttered, his voice tight with a tension he couldn't quite place, "Stay sharp." The mansion felt alive, its very walls pulsating with a malevolent energy. They fanned out, their footsteps echoing on the creaking floorboards as they explored the dusty rooms. The house had been abandoned for decades, its once grand halls now filled with the silence of forgotten memories. Each step they took seemed to disturb the ghosts of the past, sending echoes through the empty corridors. Each room seemed to whisper tales of forgotten lives, of opulent parties and whispered secrets. The walls, adorned with peeling wallpaper, hinted at a time when the house was filled with laughter and music. Old photographs, now covered in dust, showed faces that once knew joy and sorrow, their stories lost to time. In the nursery, they found her. The room, once a place of innocence and play, now felt heavy with an eerie silence. Toys lay scattered on the floor, their colors faded, and a rocking horse stood still in the corner, as if waiting for a child who would never return. A porcelain doll, its once bright dress now faded and torn, lay propped against a chipped teacup. The doll's face, though cracked and worn, still held a semblance of its former beauty. It was as if the doll had witnessed the passage of time, its eyes holding secrets that no one could ever uncover. Its eyes, two blue orbs that seemed to follow their every move, held a chilling intensity. There was something unsettling about the way the doll seemed to watch them, its gaze unblinking and cold. It was as if the doll was alive, aware of their presence and waiting for something.
Creepy little. Jack, the youngest of the group, reached out to touch the doll, his voice trailing off as a cold gust of wind swept through the room. The sudden chill made him hesitate, his hand hovering just inches from the doll. It was as if the house itself was warning him to stay away. The doll's head turned, its gaze fixed on Jack with an unnerving intensity. The movement was slow, deliberate, and filled with a malevolent intent. Jack felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead as the doll's eyes seemed to bore into his soul. He recoiled, a shiver running down his spine. The fear was palpable, a primal instinct that told him to run, to get as far away from the doll as possible. But his feet felt rooted to the spot, unable to move. "Let's just leave it," he muttered, his bravado shaken. The others could see the fear in his eyes, and it made them uneasy. They had come here seeking adventure, but now they were beginning to realize that some things were better left undisturbed.
Cal, ever pragmatic, saw only an opportunity. He was the type who believed that every old thing had value, that even in the most unlikely places, treasures could be found. His eyes gleamed with the thought of what the doll might be worth. "Cal, maybe it's worth something," he said, pocketing the doll. He ignored the uneasy looks from the others, convinced that they were just being superstitious. To him, the doll was just an object, a relic of the past, that could bring him a small fortune. Little did they know, they had just awakened something ancient and evil. The house seemed to hold its breath, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive. The air grew thick with a sense of foreboding, as if the very walls were closing in on them. They had disturbed something that should have remained buried, and now they would have to face the consequences.